Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the Board of Trustees. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. I have a few announcements. It's another reminder about collecting Harvest Thanksgiving food. We're participating with other congregations in the area for sharing of the harvest. We will collect bags for Thanksgiving meals, plus a $20 certificate towards the turkey. The items that should be included are in the parish hall. If you would rather not shop and just donate money, please contact Michelle or Tracy Farrell. Please bring bags in by November 12th, and the in-gathering meal with the other congregations will be November 18th at the First United Methodist Church in Hobart from noon till 12 p.m., and all are welcome to attend. Next Sunday's service will be our All Souls ritual, remembering our beloved dead. If you want to recognize anyone in this ritual, please bring a picture or remembrance to add to the table. November 19th will be our annual Thanksgiving meal after the service. The church will provide turkey and ham. Any side dish or dessert you can bring will be appreciated. Please sign up and let us know how many are attending and what you are able to bring. The sign-up sheet is in the parish hall on the counter where we have our food. And everybody's welcome. Okay. We are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming during that time. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Now please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you are attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. Silence your devices, take a deep breath, relax, and join us in the spirit of reverence.
This is supposed to be new technology. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light the seed of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Something that's new is not always bad.
This is a responsive reading found in the back of your gray hymnals, number 490, Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. We do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
And now please rise in body and spirit for our opening hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life. Please remain arise in the affirmation of faith, proper covenant things, unity, neighbor, and doxology. Number 123, Spirit of Life.
And now please join me in the affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
And as we've been doing the past few weeks with our recovenanting, the invitation here is to join by responding to what I say with, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. And the may we part is really important because forgiveness should always be something that we do voluntarily. And even if you're not ready for that forgiveness of either yourself or others, it's an invitation to lean into that. So for all the ways that we have not dwelled together in peace, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not sought the truth in love, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. And for all the ways that we have not helped one another, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love.
We realize that everyone cannot attend in person. We extend a special welcome to all who are joining us virtually. And thank you to our tech team for making the live stream and recording possible. For those in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbors by waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smile fill the spaces between us.
Please be seated. So on this wet, rainy, cold Sunday morning, we've gathered indoors into one particular space. But between last Sunday morning and this Sunday morning, we've been scattered, doing all sorts of different things in the world, seeing different things, hearing different things, feeling different things. And this is our chance to weave that together in whatever ways feel important and relevant in this moment. So I'm going to come around with the microphone, and if you have a joy or a sorrow that's been on your heart over this past week, I'd invite you to share it with us. And just please also share your name so that we know who you are. Does anybody have a joy or a sorrow to share with us this morning?
Good morning. The story this morning is the 3 questions. There was once a king who decided that if he knew who the most important people to be with were, and what the most important thing to do was, and when the best time to do each thing was, that he would certainly be the finest king ever to rule the land. Although he had asked his advisors, none of them had been able to give him a good answer to these questions. At last he decided to ask the advice of a wise hermit. The king dressed in the clothes of a commoner and set out for the forest. When he neared the hermit's hut, he ordered his knights to stay back at a distance, and he rode the last section of trail alone. The king found the hermit digging in his garden. The old man greeted him, but continued digging. The king told the hermit that he had come to find answers to his 3 questions. The hermit listened, but gave no answer and continued working. The king observed that the hermit was frail and elderly, and that the work was very difficult for him. The king offered to take over the digging, and the hermit allowed it. The king dug for 1 hour. Then he repeated the question, but the hermit did not answer. He worked again for another hour, and then repeated his questions with the same results. This continued for a few more hours until the sun began to sink low in the sky. Finally, the king got discouraged. "I came to you for answers, wise man. If you have none, tell me, and I will return home." Just then, someone came running up the path. They turned to see a man with his hands pressed to his stomach and blood flowing from beneath them. He dropped to the ground at the king's feet. The king and the hermit knelt down and began tending to the man. The king washed and bandaged the man's wounds, but the blood continued to flow, so he kept having to change the bandages. The king also helped the hermit to get fresh water and to help the man drink. Finally, the man slept and did not wake until the next morning. The king too slept upon the ground, waking often to watch over the man. In the morning, the man woke up and looked at the king. "Forgive me," he said to the king. "Oh, you have nothing to forgive me for," the king answered. "Oh, but I do," he said. "You were my enemy, and I had sworn to take revenge on you for killing my brother and taking my land. I knew that you were coming here today, and I decided to kill you on the trail. But when you did not return for many hours, I left my hideout to find you. Your guards recognized me and wounded me. I escaped them, but I would have bled to death if you had not cared for me. I meant to kill you, but now you have saved my life. If I live, I shall gladly serve you for the rest of my days." The king was so happy to have been reconciled with an old enemy that he immediately forgave him and promised to return his land. Then the king called for his knights to carry the man back to his castle to be cared for by his own doctor. After the wounded man had gone, the king asked the hermit once more if he would not give him the answer to his question. "Your questions have already been answered," the hermit replied. "But how?" answered the king, perplexed. "How?" repeated the hermit. "If you had not taken pity on my weakness yesterday and helped me instead of returning home, that man would have ambushed and killed you on the trail. Therefore, the most important time was when you were digging my garden beds. And I was the most important person. And the most important thing to do was to do good for me. Later, when the man came running to us, the most important thing to do was to care for him. If you had not bound up his wounds, he would have died without making peace with you. Therefore, the most important person was that man, and what you did was the most important thing, and the right time was the time when you were doing it. You see, the most important time is always the present moment. It is the only time that is important because it is the only time that we have control over. The past we can only look back on and wish that we had done something differently. The future we can only imagine. The most important person is always the one you are with in the present moment. And the only important deed is the deed that does what is best for others. At last, The king understood. He returned to rule wisely, one moment at a time.
And now please remain seated for our middle hymn in our teal hymnal. Number 1010, we give thanks. Go ahead and stay seated. You stand so often around here, so maybe just sit up this morning.
So we're in our last week of our series on place. And as I've mentioned the past few weeks, Unitarian Universalists, we sometimes talk about the interdependent web of which we are all a part. And so what exactly does that mean to be part of an interdependent web? 3 weeks ago, Duncan Brown talked about what it's like to find a sense of place, a sense of home within oneself, wherever one is. And a couple of weeks ago, Caitlin Du Bois reflected on her perspective being from the region, going away, and then coming back. And last week, I tied this current series back to something that came up a few months ago, being motivated by our desire to control, and being motivated by our desire to relate, and the difference that it makes which one we're operating from. And this week, I'll wrap it up by exploring what it is to be planted with others. There was this one time when I was growing up, just a one-time event when I was fairly young, when I was in kindergarten. I don't know of anything that happened similar either before or after it, and I actually don't even know if my recollection of it is at all accurate, because it's like 40 years ago now. And I hadn't really talked about it with anybody to process or anything, so I may be completely making it up in my head over the years, as happens with memories. Whenever we revisit a memory, we repattern it in our minds, so this might be my own tabulation, but this is how I remember it. So my parents had split up, and my mom and I were living with her parents, and I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to move back in with your parents when you're 40, but there can be some tension involved in that. And then there's also trying to get me ready for kindergarten in the morning, and I just really didn't want to go to kindergarten. I just wanted to stay home. And she was trying to get my jacket on to get me out the house, and then suddenly I felt this sharp pain in my arm. And so we went to the doctor, and they said that my shoulder had been dislocated. And steps were taken to remedy the shoulder, and some questions were asked of my mom to explore, if this was a common occurrence in the household, what our relationship was, sort of protocol, follow-up stuff. And as I said, nothing like that had happened before or since. And whether or not I'm remembering it accurately, there was an experience for both my mom and I of being dislocated. That was the second house that I'd ever lived in. Whereas before, all that I had known was living in this old 2-story house of my mother and my father near downtown Springfield, Massachusetts, I was then in a split-level home in a more suburban environment, living with my grandparents and my mom in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is a little bit down the road. And my mother was trying to figure out how to best parent a child by herself, primarily, although she had some support from her parents, and needing to deal with living with them all over again, and needing to navigate the job market in order to be able to afford a new place for us, and looking for a longer-term housing solution for herself and her child, and having to deal with my resistance to going to kindergarten that day. So, from the bigger picture to the smaller picture, there was a fair amount of life circumstance dislocation going around. Each of us has experienced feeling harried by life in some way, either for a day at a time, or a week at a time, or years at a time. Each of us has looked at the news and despaired of what we see there at times. Certainly recently, with what's been going on, that's been very loud for many of us. The trying to make it from day to day can leave us with these feelings of dislocation. A lot of the material in the Jewish Tanakh and the Christian Old Testament and the Islamic Torah are about dislocation. Dislocation from one's people, from the land itself. Much of it was written during or after the Babylonian captivity. The Neo-Babylonian Empire had destroyed the Holy Temple in Jerusalem and forced the key Hebrews to relocate to the biggest city in the world, Babylon, 500 miles away, and kept them there for 50 years, until the Neo-Babylonian Empire lost a war with the Persians, and then they were allowed to go home. So just imagine the most holy place in your life being destroyed, and then you moved 500 miles away in a time with no planes, trains, or automobiles to the capital of the country that just destroyed the holy place and kept there for 50 years. So it's 2023 right now, so 2073 as the end of that exile that eventually comes, but you don't know if it's ever coming. Or imagine that you're not one of the ones that was exiled, that you're one of the ones who's still back in the holy city, and knowing so many of the people who were sent away, and never seeing them again for 50 years until 2073 rolls around. And their children who have never known any place except for this capital city that they've been growing up in, moving back after 50 years and trying to knit everything back together again. That's why this is the turning point of so much of these holy texts. This profound experience of dislocation. So the book of Daniel that I talked about last week, it's a compilation of stories that are inspired by these Jewish exiles in Babylon in the 6th century BCE. And it was compiled about 400 years later because they're still telling these stories. They're still trying to process that experience. And at one point, the king calls Daniel to his kingdom chamber, whatever they called the hall back then, I'm not quite sure. And he tells him about this dream that he had. Upon my bed, this I saw. There was a tree at the center of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew great and strong. Its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the ends of the whole earth. But then in the dream, the king says, a holy watcher orders that the tree be axed. Cut down the tree and chop off its branches. The king is troubled by this dream that he had. This troubling can often be a good sign in our lives. We can get too comfortable, things can get too perfect, we can get too relaxed, and get just sort of stuck in a certain degree of comfort and the status quo. The troubling is where the possibility opens up of some new path. when we recognize that something is not really working in some way, we have a couple of options. We can choose to face the challenge and make some changes and deal with the discomfort of acting in new and unfamiliar ways that might cause some extra unhappiness for a little while, that might take some extra time to figure out, that might be painful. Or we can choose to avoid those growing pains and stick with the familiar, simpler option, continuing to function the way that we've been functioning, to endure the same suffering or harm that we've been enduring. So the king has this experience of being troubled and seeks some guidance, some counsel from Daniel. And the king probably feels scared in this moment. He's had this dream of this beautiful tree that's been chopped down. And Daniel probably feels scared. How do I tell the king what this dream means if the king ends up being pissed off at me? But the fact that the king is asking him to interpret his dream could mean that he's ready to hear some hard truths, to make a change in how he's living his life. And so Daniel once again tries to thread this needle of holding to his own integrity while not dooming himself. And he manages to tell the king that he must live outside among the wild animals and eat grass like oxen, reminding him of the true order of the world and his place in it. And only then will his kingdom be restored. In the Daniel stories, Babylon is at risk of ecological collapse. So Daniel's prescription cuts to the heart of the matter. The king should get reinitiated into nature, to be bathed with the dew of heaven and cast his lot with the animals of the field, to get reacquainted with the natural world, like the bathing in the river that I talked about several weeks ago, in which I asked you to imagine being cured of leprosy by bathing in the Calumet River 150 years ago. Daniel encouraged the king to learn that, in David Pritchett's words, humans live not by roads, bricks, and mortar, but rather by those fleeting photons captured by the chlorophyll in the grass and every green plant. There's a difference between occupying a place and inhabiting a place. So when we talk about concepts like the interdependent web of which we all are a part, what relationships exactly are we pointing to in that? A couple weeks ago, Duncan talked about finding resilience by cultivating our relationship with the inner dimension of place, a place of resilience which we can still foster regardless of our external circumstances. And he talked about how it's particularly needed now because of one study, for instance, that found that since 1965, children have shown a greater dependency on the external world for happiness and their sense of identity, which leads to anxiety and a host of disorders. But when we cultivate inner resilience, it empowers us to be able to enrich and deepen wherever we are, imbuing a place with our values and our love. And Caitlin Du Bois a couple weeks ago gave us a beautiful window into her recent experience of imbuing this place with her values and her love. Both her reflections on feeling like when she was growing up here, life happened anywhere but here, and also her homecoming and seeing this place through new eyes. Both the pain of here, levels of pollution and trash and waste and dirty snow and hard water and pavement and billboard after billboard and brownfields and sacrifice zones and the abandonment of Gary and the intensity of spoken and unspoken lines and the violence of what a public health crisis looks like because of some of those lines. And she also talked about the beauty of here. The smell of fall, the sounds of crickets and katydids and cicadas and frogs, opening up the milkweeds and seeing all the seeds, the goldenrod and green woods with such tall, lean trees and ferns that cover the ground, and sandy dirt and clay soil, and acorns falling on the roof, and the rustling of leaves. particularly in the largely online existence that so many of us face and experience these days. We can feel cut off with these tangible experiences of the world. We can get cut off from the truth that you are a part of this place. You get to take up space. The very ground of your existence is already in relationship with everything that is. This is beyond just an idea. Can you feel it in your bones? As tangibly as you might feel the soil between your fingers if you lift it up from the ground. Can you feel your relatedness? Can you enter a holy conversation with all that surrounds you? One of the suggestions during the homework portion of the sermon last week was to consider where your food comes from and what the impact of the food networks of which we're a part have. The well-being of those who grow the food, the networks that get it here. Considering all of this from our kingly positions of importing goods from far and wide. What dreams do we dream? What riches visit us in the night? What anxieties perturb us? And who is interpreting our dreams for us? Who is interpreting our dreams for us? And then how might we take steps to foster food sovereignty for people everywhere? We showed some images up on the screen a few weeks ago of the ecoregions that the Environmental Protection Agency has created to show how different places in North America are related to one another. And right here in this area, we're sort of on the boundary between what they call the central USA plains, which go from western Wisconsin through the northeastern half of Illinois and half of Indiana and a small bit of Michigan, the western half of Ohio, and the mixed wood plains, which go from here to southeastern Quebec and western Vermont. In this meeting place between different ecoregions, we're in the ecotone, the overlapping biodiverse edge between two ecosystems. In the words of David Holmgren, this is a place where things happen, where a forest meets a prairie, where a river flows into the sea, or at nearly any other boundary between two ecosystems is a cauldron of biodiversity. The edge is richer than what lies on either side. And in the words of Toby Hemingway, places of transition and translation where matter and energy change speed or stop or often change into something else is what an ecotone is. I've spoken with a few of you about how a few weeks ago I finally made it to the Ivanhoe South Nature Preserve in Gary. And there's this amazing feeling of going into any nature preserve generally, just getting to cross over from a place where humans are going about their regular business to a place where we're visitors. But this one in particular, any of you who've driven around the streets of Gary know that the pavement isn't always the most easy on one's suspension, let's say. And so actually getting to I'd never been there before. I'd seen a sign coming through on the train for part of the Ivanhoe Nature Preserve. But getting to the actual entrance of this part, the pavement on that particular road is also not one of the best. And trying to drive the speed limit, there's a quick turn, which you missed the first time around, so I had to drive down to the end and turn around and come back. And there's a little parking space for like 4 cars. And I get out of my car and I just walk down and see these gorgeous trees and this incredible underbrush just all about me in a way that words can't describe because they're just words. They're just a map of something. And I'm not enough of an ecologist to know what the names of any of the plants or the trees are, but the feeling of peace and connection that are available in the midst of all of everything else makes possible the addressing of that dislocation. Caitlin said a couple weeks ago, we as people of this region get to exist in many worlds, in many contradictions, in many tensions. That is the best sense of who we are. Seeing and experiencing the multitudes of what it means to be here. There is something distinctive in here that there is no cloth to cover. We, the people of the in-between, the both and, the tension, the neither, straddling contradictions, we are really important in this time. We can hold more than many can, and when we choose to feel it, recognize it, and accept it, holding it means knowing and seeing and the weight of responsibility. If we choose to go grounded in that truth, the pain and the beauty of this earth, we can help lead the way. We are important and unique in that. We are needed in that, you and I, to find hope and fortitude in the face of fear, for all of us to be planted here together. As Jonathan McRae wrote, places can breed cooperation when people who find themselves held together in a shared place discover that their best chance for survival is learning to work together. From the Garden of Eden to the New Jerusalem, the biblical images for salvation that recur most often concern not some spectral heaven, but a transfigured earth. Only when we are reminded of the true order of the world and our place in it, only then are we able to experience this transfigured earth. And so my suggestion to you over this coming week is to practice being in this place with one another, to share with one another two things. One of them, one place of joy for you in this Calumet region, and one place of grief for you in this Calumet region. Not from behind the guarding of just telling an anecdote from your mind, but allowing some of your heart and soul to come through in your share. So that in this ground of relatedness, we can find ourselves. Re-engage our ability to be people in the world, in this place, with these people, in this moment, so that the Spirit of life may come unto us, singing in our hearts, blowing in the wind, moving across our hands, holding us close, and setting us free. So that when you feel despair for the world growing in you, you can reach out from your solitude. You can weave yourself into the world, contacting and taking part in the peace of wild things, feeling all around you the grace of the world and the freedom to be found in weaving yourself with all of it, witnessing the world going on. The sun and the clear pebbles of the rain moving across the landscapes and over the prairies and the deep trees and the mountains and the rivers. The wild geese high in the clean blue air, heading home again. The world offering itself to your imagination, still calling to you harsh and exciting. May your inhabitation of this place continue ever to deepen. And may you find in that deepening such comfort and enlivening that you might not yet believe is possible. Knowing that when we reacquaint ourselves with that source, we can build a land in which justice does roll down like waters, and peace is created. And may that ever be so.
Thank you, Pastor. Now is the time in our service for the offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in the tin cups goes to a charity chosen by the Faith in Action Ministry each month. This month, the money in the cups goes to our Family Giving Project, as we do every year for October and November. Our Family Giving Project this year is through in cooperation with Hearts in Motion and for needy families. I want to congratulate this congregation for its generosity to this point in the year. The loose change for social change, we call it, in the cups, has exceeded $3,200 this year. So that's just amazing. Your generosity is awe-inspiring. So can I have 4 volunteers, please, to help with that? For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. Now please rise as you are willing and able to join us in singing the closing hymn, number 121, We'll Build a Land.
We'll
Our closing words can be found in the back of the gray hymnal, number 483. These words are written by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives on forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free.
The postlude is a song called Der Wanderer, or The Wanderer, by Franz Schubert. Certainly a story about dislocation, not feeling at home anywhere. You'll hear the word land, which actually is land. I'm singing it in German, which is why I wanted to introduce it a little bit.
Ich komme vom Gebirge her. Es dampft das Tal. Es braust das Meer. Es braust das Meer. Ich wandel still, bin wenig froh. Und immer fragt der Sorte wo, die Sonne düngelte hier so kalt, die Blüte welk, das Leben alt, und was sie reden, leerer Schall. Ich bin ein Fremdling überall. Wo bist du, mein geliebtes Land, gesucht, gelohnt und nie gekannt? Das Land so hoffnungsgrün, das Land, wo meine Rosen blühen, wo meine Freunde wandelnd gehen, wo meine Toten auferstehen, das Land, das meine Sprache spricht. O Land, wo bist du? Ich wandel still
We extinguish this flame for not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
If you'd like to join for a discussion after the worship service, in 15 minutes we'll gather right here. Please bring some chairs if you're able so that we have enough seating for everybody.